So another Patreon exclusive video, and this time we have Orca's Heart version 2, which is a beautiful sequencer with all sorts of unique features. So as always, let's start with the basic functionality. So here I already have the sequencer clocked, and as you can see we have 8 sequences for 8 voices, but actually this sequencer was really meant to be used polyphonically. So for this we can use the blue outputs here, right? So they will output 8 voices of polyphony. So in this case I have an FM voice with 2 FM operators, so I will send the CV1 as pitch information to both oscillators, and you can see it's polyphonic with 8 channels, and also the gate to both voices. Right, and we have the most basic sequence. But now we can change the length. This will go up to 64 steps, but for now let's just stay with 16, let's say. There's also a quantizer. There are actually 2 quantizers. We will go back to this soon enough, but with the first quantizer we can change the notes we want. So let's go with the same pentatonic minor here, without the D maybe. Right, and now by changing the X and Y algorithms we can change the sequence. Each of the different combinations will give us a different sequence. Right, as you can see. Just by changing the algorithms, we can change the sequence itself. Right, something like this. Now there are also here modulation outputs, and they are also polyphonic. Right, so if I use, for example, CV1 to modulate the FM depth, again we have 8 channels of polyphony with different modulation, in this case for the FM depth. Right, so again each voice will get its own modulation. I have here a few more voices. I have here a kick drum with plats going through some delay. And I have here hi-hats with white noise going through a bandpass filter, and there's some random modulation involved here. Now I have here also a bass voice with kick all from Befako, again with some filtering and a delay. But now what we will do is I will use the monophonic, one of the monophonic outputs, one of the different sequences here, just to trigger this voice by itself. So it's somewhat connected to the FM operator and somewhat not. Let's test a few. First one was the best. Right, and we can also again use the monophonic pitch in this case. Let's go back to the quantizers and see how we can use them to add movement. Here I already have a sequence going with a classic VCO, some filtering, some modulation, right? I'm using the envelope generator VCA to control the amplitude on everything, and there is also some delay involved. Right, again using the polyphonic outputs here from the sequencer. Right, now the first thing we can do is transpose the sequence by an octave up with the octave button. Right here we have 2 for the 2 quantizers. If I click it, it goes up an octave. or going back to the original octave. And of course we can do this also externally, let's say with something like a clock division. Right here I have a clock division of 10, of 8 in this case actually. Right, so now we get also octave jumps. And we have again also the second quantizer that we can use. We just have to switch between them. We can do this here with the button. You can see here it says A and B. So now I can switch to the B quantizer, right? And here enter different notes. Let's go with the D, F, and A. Right, if I click this again, both of them will be on. Or again, I can go back just to the first one. Now in this case, again, we can do this externally, but in this case, the external control will only switch between A and B. It will not switch, or it will not turn on both. Right, and here I have the clock division of 10 that I can use to switch between them. Right, so again, just with these two controls here and the two quantizers, we can have lots and lots of movement and variation. And we also have scale presets that we can use. So here I have another sequence, sequencing an FM voice with two FM operators. And actually, before I show you the presets, let me solo this for a second. There's another thing I want to show you first. So also here, as you can see, I'm clocking the sequencer externally. And when doing this, we can change sort of the gate length or the intensity of the sequence with the speed control. So let me show you this quickly here with the scope. If I show you the gates, right, if I take the speed now all the way down, you can see there are less notes being played. The gate mostly stays high. But if I bring the speed up, you can see there are more triggers, or more voices are triggered, and more and more and more until we get all of them. Right, so this will sort of change. You can see the pulse width of the gate, but also by that also changing the intensity of the sequence. Right, so this you can also use to add variation. I will place it somewhere here. Right, and now let's go back again to the presets. Here we have presets for both quantizers. We just have to enable them with this button, and then we can switch between them. There are all sorts of presets saved here already. Right, and of course also here we can do this externally. So here I have the ADDR sequencer that I will use to sequence different combination of notes. Right, so again we have some variation. I will add some delay to this. I have here a copy of this voice going through Prince of Perception. And I will also add random octave jumps. I have here chances. Chances will add probability to the incoming clock in this case. Right, so if I send this to the CV input here, or gate input of the octave plus, we will get random octave jumps. And I have here also a bass, again with the kick all and the individual outputs. I would like to go over the main controls and show you what each of them is doing. I have here a dummy cable coming from the mold going to the clock input, just so the sequencer doesn't run by itself. If I disconnect it, it will start running. Right, now we looked already at the speed, at the length, and also at the algorithms controls. Right, but now we have also the transposition control. This will offset the pitch up and down in cents without staying quantized to any scale. Right, this will go up and down by 3 octaves. right, and everything in between. But we also have here the shift control, and this will only shift the sequence up in semitones, and it will be quantized. Right, again, it will go in this case up to 1 octave. Right, so this still stays quantized. We have here the gate length control. This will just change the length of the gate. Right, then we have here the space control, which will add spaces between the notes. So if, for example, we have just a 4-step sequence, right, this is quite repetitive, but now I can start adding some space to it, and it will add more variation. Right, so the sequence is less intensive, right, but still we get some variation even though we have just a length of 4 steps. Then we have the voices control. Now this will change the number of voices playing, but it will still keep things polyphonic, so it will only disable the active gate. So if, for example, I take this down from 8 just to 1, right, you can see if I hover here, we still get 8 channels of polyphony. You see things are changing for the 8 outputs. But if I go here to the gates, you will see only gate number 1 is actually active. Right, if I take this, let's say, to 4, again, only the first 4 gates will actually play. Right, let me bring this back to 8. Now, if I change this for a second to, let's take the space all the way down and change this to, let's say, 16 steps. Right, we have here the rotate that will push the notes to different places on the grid, and again we will get a different sequence. Right, then we have the spread control. This will add variation to the timing of the hits and will spread them across the steps. Becomes wonkier and wonkier. Then we have the X mode. Now this will add cross modulation inside the module itself, but the manual doesn't say exactly what is modulating what. In any case, this will add again more variation to the sequence. Now, of course, all of these controls have also CV inputs. So here I have a 5-step sequence with dark energy. Right, it will sound like this. Right, I have here an ADDR sequencer that's running with the clock division. So I can use it, for example, to sequence the Y algorithm and get a bit more variation here. Let's wait for it. Now, right on these steps, it will change. I have here another ADDR running with a different clock division, and this I will use, for example, to sequence the shift and shift the sequence up and down. Right, again, getting more variation. Adding more movement even to a simple 5-step sequence. Here I have a 4-step sequence, sequencing interzone from Valley, which is a beautiful voice by itself. And here you can see I'm using another clock division to trigger a sample and hold, or a random voltage that will then randomly modulate the X algorithm. Right, so again we get some variation. Here I have another voice. This is pellet, sort of an FM voice. Right, in this case with 7 steps. Right, and here I'm using again an ADDR with a different division to modulate the rotation. So again, just adding simple movement, but lots and lots of variation. Now again, don't forget there are also individual outputs available. Pitch, gates, modulation, gate modulation, and so on. So in this case, you can see I have 3 different voices. I have once here the FM operator going through some delay. Right, and this is getting again a sequence from the monophonic outputs here. Right, so it gets just 1 voice out of the 8 voices available. In this case, it's a 64-step sequence. The second voice is a kick-all from Befaco. And the third voice is the VCV VCO. I'm sending it through a modulated bandpass filter. Right, there's also an envelope and VCA, some panning. So 3 different individual distinct voices that I can use the same sequencer to sequence basically and modulate. Right, now of course this works also nicely for percussive voices, again using the monophonic outputs. I have here once a kick with tremor 2, going through a tap dancer here. Another sequence sequencing the noise section as a hi-hat, going through Prince of Perception. And I have 2 percussive voices, again sequenced from the monophonic outputs. Right, so this can be also quite interesting for percussive voices. And that's it. As you can see, this sequencer is very intuitive and full of possibilities. Thank you again so much for your support. Cheers.